Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to the United Stand in the studio, and big news. Lots to talk about actually for a Tuesday in the international break. We're going to be talking about a 35 million bid for Todibo. It's interesting because Leo J says in the chat, I wonder if this means Varane's going. Bit of big news around Rafael Varane. Also going to be talking about the public plan from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, which is going to be coming in over the net. Well, it could be this morning, could be tomorrow, could be Wednesday. But how is Sir Jim Ratcliffe going to win the fans over? We'll talk about what his plans are around that. Ambassadors coming into the club, ex-players, what players they're meant to be. Because remember, it was back at the start of the year. It wasn't just Sheikh Jassim who was talking about ex-players being involved. Sir Jim Ratcliffe was also linked heavily to getting ex-players involved. We'll talk about that as well. Also, another Manchester United player withdraws from international duty. Should we have alarm bells for that? Jadon Sancho latest involving a swap deal. Also as well, Garnacho. I don't know whether you'd noticed that about Garnacho not being part of the Argentinian squad. I think this is a big, good bit of positive news. And also Jamie Carragher saying that Aston Villa's manager and team are better than Manchester United. Is he right? Has Jamie Carragher finally thrown a dart at the dartboard and hit a 20? I think he probably has, to be fair. Right, let's get into it. How are we all doing in the studio as well? Nice to be here in the United Stand Towers, as I call it. But let's get straight into this. I was driving up this morning. I'm listening to the radio and a story comes in that Manchester United are set to make a £35 million bid for Todibo in January, and that this deal could happen, of course, because he currently plays for Nice and Sir Jim Ratcliffe is the owner there. Now, look, this is not breaking news to me. It shouldn't be breaking news to you, the United Stand viewer, because we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks now. Could it happen in January? What is the source of this information? Well, look, the source of the information, I think it originates from the Mirror, and it's been reported in some wider media this morning. I certainly heard it on the radio this morning. Look, this deal can be done. £35 million, I've got to say, actually sounds a little bit too much. Some of you might think it's about right. Let us know in the chat. I think £35 million might be a little bit much for Todibo. He is playing very well for Nice at the moment, who are in a bit of a title race. He is a French international, but he's a Nice centre-back who is in the French squad. He isn't Saliba, he's not Rafael Varane, and I don't think that realistically £35 million is the right price for a player that, let's not forget, the rule hasn't come in place yet where you can do deals with clubs that you partially own. We've seen it, as I mentioned last week, with Salzburg selling Sesko to Leipzig for what, 24 million quid? He was being quoted at £50 million for United and Chelsea. So if we are to do a deal with Todibo, I'd be very disappointed if we spent £35 million. Because remember, mentioning this, there are some people in the United fan base who think that that Sir Jim Ratcliffe can walk into the club and inject £200 million that goes into transfers. That can't happen. This cannot happen, and the sooner people realise this, the better. This cannot happen. So Jim Ratcliffe cannot put £200 million into the club that is instantly available for transfers. If that could happen under Premier League rules, then Newcastle would have already won the Premier League because they'd have spent £1 billion. You can't do this. It doesn't matter how wealthy your owners or investors are. You cannot walk in as a Newcastle owner and go, we've got billions and billions of pounds. We're the richest club in the world. Here's $2 billion in January. Go and buy what you want. Let's get Mbappe. Let's get Haaland. You can't do it. There are rules in place as to how money comes into the club. It's called financial fair play. So Jim Ratcliffe, even if he has got 200, 300, 400 million pounds to put into the club in January or next summer, he's still got to operate in financial fair play, which means removing players on massive wages, selling those players, and creating that gap between spend on transfers and wages and revenue. We've got to make that gap bigger, and then money can go into it. So if you're going to buy Todibo, I would hope that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is aware of these restrictions, and we can't be spending £40 million on a centre-back. We've got to be getting some sort of favourable deal there, which may mean that it gets pushed to the summer. But I personally think if Sir Jim Ratcliffe owns Nice, which he does, and he's investing into Manchester United, and we're buying a Nice player, there's got to be some clever business thinking of, look, I need to maximise what Manchester United can spend. Let's do a deal for 25 million. Let's do a deal for 30 million. The reason I think it could happen in January, and I'm not observing this as in the know or it's definitely going to happen, but the reason I think this could happen in January is because there are growing rumours that Varane will go into Saudi Arabia in January. Manchester United want to keep this on the down low. Manchester United want to portray that everything's well between Ten Hag and Varane. There are no issues. Varane's a model professional. He's a valuable member of the team. Ten Hag sees him as that. There's no plans for Varane to go to Saudi Arabia. What I'm hearing and what I would suggest is that this is just PR to get us through to January, and I would not be surprised in January if we see Rafael Varane go to Saudi Arabia for maybe 20, 25, 30 million pounds. His wages reduced, his wages gone. We've got 20, 30 million quid and we go straight in for Todibo and do a deal with Nice. I would not be surprised if that happens. It might be more preferable for everybody to wait till the end of the season, but I would not be surprised from what we're hearing. There is a breakdown in relationship between Varane and Ten Hag. Rafael Varane is part of the senior leadership in that dressing room. The senior leadership of that dressing room at the end of last season was Rafael Varane, Casemiro, Luke Shaw, Tom Heaton, I think Marcus Rashford, Bruno Fernandes. And it is now in a situation where Varane is clearly not part of that senior leadership team. So something has fallen by the wayside. When you've got Johnny Evans starting ahead of you in a Manchester derby, ahead of Rafael Varane, something has gone wrong. Some people might say, well, it's just to do with injury. Maybe Ten Hag doesn't trust him. Some people would say it's something more sinister. But I think that we've been here before. We've been here before with Cristiano Ronaldo, whereby Ten Hag in the August is saying he's part of my plans, I want him to be here. And then he's dropping him, he's not picking him, and it ends up in a situation where there is a complete breakdown in that relationship. I feel that United are never going to come out and say there's been a fallout between Rafael Varane and Ten Hag and he's looking to go in January, because we're only in the middle of November. But I feel that if United can get a centre-back in January, Varane goes to Saudi Arabia in January. So keep your eye on that. There is absolutely 100% something going on with Rafael Varane and Manchester United, and it's just about whether they can see it through till the summer or whether they decide to part ways in January. And at the moment, I'd flip a coin on it. I really would. And I think if you said to Ten Hag and whoever the director of football is, you can get Todibo in January, then Rafael Varane will be going to Saudi Arabia, because I think Varane is probably looking at the situation and going, I can fight hard, I can win my shirt back, I'm better than Maguire, I'm better than Lindelof, I'm better than Evans, but I'm also at a point where if Saudi Arabia come in, I've retired from French football, I've won everything there is in football, and I'm not realistically going to be part of a rebuild that's over 3 years at Manchester United at my age with my injury record. So I think it would be interesting to see how it pans out. Eric Ten Hag getting rid of winners who he can't control, says the Voracious. Ten Hag is a coward, he can't control the winners, says AK. Mark, you're talking bollocks about FFP rules. They don't apply to Saudi clubs, so why should they apply to us, says Beachy. Well, you're talking bollocks. I actually thought you were going to give us a bit of a lesson in FFP there. You've spoken bollocks. FFP does apply to clubs in England. What happens with Saudi Arabian clubs is to do with FIFA. We're talking about the Premier League. There are no Saudi Arabian clubs in the Premier League. All right, technically Newcastle, but Newcastle cannot just go and spend £500 million. I'll tell you how rich Newcastle are. If the Premier League suddenly said to Newcastle, you know what, you're so rich, you can just spend what you like. Newcastle could buy most players in Europe and still be really rich. Like, they are super rich. But they can't do it because of FFP, and it's not going to happen. Morning Studio Bridge, says Mike Royce, and Mourinho said, if you can't coach the big players, you're not a good coach, says Jody. Well, look, check out last night's video. We were talking about this last night. Ronaldo, De Gea, Varane, Casemiro, Sancho, all big earners, potentially all big egos, all on the chopping block for Ten Hag. On the other hand, Rashford's a big earner and he's working with him. Look, I think with this Todibo story is interesting. What I would say about Todibo is Chelsea are sniffing around. They are. Chelsea are sniffing around. There was a story last week about Chelsea and Todibo, but if you can't get to... Look, if Sir Jim Radcliffe can't get Todibo to come to Manchester United, he may as well stay running Nice. Like, I think the deal happens. Keep your eye on Varane. If Varane stays till the summer, we'll go after Todibo in the summer. If Varane goes in January, because we can get Todibo in January, we'll do that deal. I don't know about any other deals in January, but that's the one to keep an eye on. Another name I would mention as well. Hi, Mark. Considering the centre-back crisis, should Ten Hag try McTominay there? He's average in midfield. Happy for you to shoot it down because I'm not I'm not sold on the idea either, says Benny. I mean, Scott McTominay at centre-back, I don't know about that. Scott McTominay at centre-back. I mean, if you're desperate, he is tall and good in the air, but he's not. I don't think McTominay's a very good tackler. I don't think he reads the game very well. Scott McTominay is good at arriving late into the box and finishing. He's actually good at that. It's just other things I don't think he's that good at. William says, could you see Radcliffe employing a Chelsea-like transfer contract strategy where contracts are stretched out over multiple years to get around financial fair play? Well, William, I think any club should be doing that, because how Chelsea have spent $1 billion in 12 months and continue to spend, you'd be foolish not to do that. Talking of Chelsea, talking of Manchester United, talking of news, let me just say this, very, very early on this, keep an eye on Victor Osimhen. Keep an eye on Victor Osimhen. It's gone very quiet on him. I don't think he's done his contract with Napoli yet, which is good for two. If he signs the contract, there'll be a release clause. If he doesn't sign the contract, they're going to have to sell him anyway. Keep your eye on Victor Osimhen. Manchester United desperately wanted Harry Kane. They couldn't do a deal. They like Osimhen. Ten Hag likes Osimhen. Osimhen, Premier League, match made in heaven. This deal will happen. It'll either be Chelsea, it could be Manchester United. I'd say at the moment Chelsea will get Victor Osimhen, well, I suppose he could end up going to Bayern. Well, he won't go to Bayern. Harry Kane could end up going to Real Madrid, maybe Barcelona. But if he comes to the Premier League, Victor Osimhen will go to Chelsea or Manchester United. Now, Manchester United have sort of not been linked to Victor Osimhen, but it's not because we're not interested. It's because of the sale. It's because of the Sheikh Jassim offer. It's because of the Sir Jim Radcliffe offer. As soon as that gets settled, and we'll talk about that in a minute, don't be surprised next summer if Manchester United sign Victor Osimhen. It will be dependent on what Sir Jim Radcliffe is going to tell us about finances and money available, but Man United definitely want another striker. And this should not be forgotten. Rasmus is 20 years of age and we're overplaying him because Ten Hag doesn't trust Martial. We want another striker, and Ten Hag would want a very experienced striker who can score goals. Victor Osimhen would come to Manchester United. If we have the finances in place, I wouldn't be surprised if we go for Victor Osimhen in the summer. And that would be the sort of deal I think United would do. Very early on that. It's not going to happen in January, but just keep an eye on it, because that is a deal that United would like to do and Ten Hag would like to do. Hi Mark, what do you think of Jim's 25%? Not what we wanted, but better than anything. Also, do you feel we're doing bad because we have our deadwood, says Sean? Well, I'm just about to talk about the latest with Sir Jim. Who was the genius who said Saudi Arabia and FFP? Since when is Saudi Arabia a part of UEFA? Respect you for trying to answer some of these comments, says DK. Osimhen will go to Chelsea, says Yannick. I can't wait for Paul Mitchell to sack Ten Hag, says Joe. Osimhen is obviously going to Chelsea, says TPW. And do you think we could have two striker partnership with Højlund and Osimhen, says Kill? I think in the modern game, you need two strikers. I want to talk about what Jamie Carragher said, but let's just give you an update on the Sir Jim Radcliffe situation. There is about to be a public PR drop in relation to Sir Jim Radcliffe. We don't know the exact hour or time or day it's going to drop. It could be Thursday, it could be 12 o'clock today, but there is going to be an avalanche of PR drop around Sir Jim Radcliffe. And I don't say that from a PR spin point of view. I say this from a reality point of view. He's about to acquire 25% of this club. The Glazers are about to stay. And with that news, it is big news. It could have been a full sale to Qatar, and I'm sure many of us wanted a full sale and the Glazers out, but this is what's going to happen. And there is about to be a massive avalanche of news coming out. Some of it will be complete and utter nonsense. Some of it will be factually correct. We await that news. But what do we know about that news, and what do we know about what will happen? Well, there'll certainly be some sort of vision around the future of Manchester United Stadium, Old Trafford. There'll certainly be some sort of vision and statement around transfer spend, because he'll be answering these questions. What I really want to know is, what power does he have? What power does he have to sack Ten Hag or buy Victor Osimhen? And can the Glazers overrule him? I think I would predict the Glazers can overrule him, but maybe I'm wrong, but I would predict they can. And as part of that, what is the roadmap to full ownership, if there is a roadmap to full ownership, and how certain is it? Is it going to be, the plan is in 3 years' time to own 70% of the club and the Glazers will be gone? And is it a plan or is it a statement? Because what's not lost on me is that this club is still owned by the Glazers. And that leaves us in a very precarious and uncertain situation. So we await this because I think it's going to be very interesting on how much we get that's factual and how much of it is predicted or part of the plan. Because is it factual that we're going to spend hundreds of millions of pounds to try and compete with Man City, or is it the plan to compete with Man City? Because we've been part of plans and processes for a decade. Like it feels like we have a 3-year plan every 3 years, and it feels like we're at the start of another 3-year plan, and this is probably our 5th 3-year plan. So I want to see facts. I would love to see a PR drop that says, factually, in 2026, Sir Jim Ratcliffe will own 70% of the club and the Glazers will disappear. And I'd love to see the roadmap to that that's definitively signed as part of this contract. I don't think we will see that. I think we might get a little bit of a hint that it could happen, but I don't think we will see that. So I'm very interested to see. And as part of this, there's some very big decisions that need to be made as well. We are fully expecting Sir Jim Ratcliffe to start speaking to the media. Once this deal has been ratified, I think Ineos and Sir Jim will start to be very open about what's going on because they'll be looking to win people round, which is quite rightly. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a sit-down interview with somebody like Gary Neville. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw something like that. Gary is seen by a lot of the hardcore United fans as a true red. And if you're Sir Jim Ratcliffe and you sit down with Gary Neville, then that's Gary Neville's seal of approval. So that gets you integrated with a certain section of the fan base. So I think we'll see something like that. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a place on the board or as an ambassador for people like Gary Neville and maybe a couple of others. The problem those ex-players have sitting down and doing this is the streets won't forget and receipts will be kept. If you get on board with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, you are getting on board with the Glazers. Nobody can deny that. You are. And that's why if I was about to do that interview or I was about to become an ambassador for Manchester United, you've got to be very, very careful. Where do all the fan groups sit at the moment? We've had protests about the Glazers. We've had full sale only. We've had Glazers out. The Glazers aren't going anywhere. So why are we suddenly going to go, oh, I'm going to get on board with it because Sir Jim seems like a nice guy? There are so many questions to be asked here. And I think we have to be cynical. We have to ask questions. We have to be dubious because we've been lied to before. We've been lied to multiple times. We've been put into debt. We've been put into financial trouble. We've been allowed to just disintegrate as a football club and our rivals have just gone shooting past us. So we've had plenty of statements of promises in the past from the Glazers that haven't come to fruition. It's a very dangerous game for an ex-player or a fan to go, well, I'm going to give Sir Jim the benefit of the doubt when he's only got 25% and the Glazers are still in charge. So there's a lot of questions. And, you know, I don't envy Sir Jim and Ineos trying to work through this because they've got to steer a ship through some very, very murky waters. And they've got to try and be honest because this could backfire badly. It's a hard job. It's a really hard job. And, you know, bringing a Roy Keane in or a Paul Scholes or whoever, they become associated with that and they're not coming into it with their eyes closed. Like, hello, lads. Man United are owned by the Glazers. The Glazers have destroyed this football club. You sign up to be part of Sir Jim's vision. I'd only be signing up if I saw categorically in black and white that the Glazers will be gone in 3 years. Because otherwise, if this goes wrong, you've signed up to be part of the Glazer party. So it's interesting. Maybe some people don't find it interesting. I find it fascinating. And I think it's going to be super fascinating to find out what detail we get. Because I don't think we can be in a situation where Sir Jim sits down and does an interview with Neville, or he gets Neville and Scholes and Keane on the board, and we haven't got a definitive Glazers will be gone in 3 years. That exposes them badly and it exposes Sir Jim badly because I think this job he's got is nigh on impossible anyway. I don't think even if he owns the club in 3 years' time, we can compete with Man City and Newcastle. I think we're done in relation to that. So I'm intrigued. I'm massively intrigued as to how we're going to compete. And I'm even more intrigued as to what the plan is and what the Glazers will allow to. There's something really important here to remember as well. What the Glazers still own this football club. Why would they sign a deal that basically makes them look stupid? Why would they sign a deal that lets United fans go, ha ha, you're out of the club in 3 years' time? There are so many questions about this, and it's going to take some fantastic journalism and some real honesty from Ineos and Sir Jim and bravery to inform the fans. And I wonder whether we will get it or not. Jim's interview will be manipulation of the fans to get them on side, says Jody. Look, the worst case scenario would be for Sir Jim Radcliffe to start doing interviews about my plan is to make us the best club in the world, put Manchester back on the map. We're going to be competing with Man City and Newcastle. We're going to get all these ex-players involved. The feel-good factor. That's just glorified giving Ole Gunnar Solskjaer the manager's job. People will see through it. We need to be professional. And to be professional, you've got to have a defined plan. I'm looking for things like we're going to revolutionise our recruitment department. Look at clubs like Brighton. Look at clubs like Leipzig and the relationships they have with Red Bull and other clubs. These are the things we're looking to do. Fundamentally restructure and rebuild our whole recruitment department. I want us to have the best fitness department in the world. We struggled with injuries for the last decade. That might be coincidence, it might be bad luck, but more and more likely it's not coincidence and bad luck. We're going to revolutionise sports science. I've worked in cycling, all these areas. We are going to revolutionise sports science and we're going to be at the forefront of it. I've said recruitment, transfers, we're going to be smarter. We're going to pay players less who are more hungry to play for Manchester United because it's Manchester United, instead of overpaying for players who don't really want to be here. They want to be here for wages. We are going to revolutionise this football club, and in every department, my aim is to make us the best. I want the best CEO, the best director of football, the best manager, the best team, and it's going to take time, but I will deliver on all of these areas, and if I don't, then I am open to the criticism of the fans. These are the sort of statements I want. What I don't want is sit down with an ex-player, oh yeah, we're going to be competing with Man City again. Yeah, we will, yeah. Because we've heard all this. We've heard it from Ed Woodward. We've heard it from the Glazers. I don't want to hear about Super Leagues. I don't want to hear about TV deals. I want to see this football club revolutionised. I want a plan for Old Trafford that's akin to the new camp. I want to see, definitive plans and a roadmap to making Old Trafford one of the greatest grounds in Europe again, utilising this great stadium that we have. So these are all things that I want to see. What I do not want to see is PR and propaganda. What I do not want to see is something that we can all see it for what it is. Oh, he sat down with Roy Keane, or he sat down with Gary Neville, or he sat down with Paul Scholes, and he's really just associating himself with those because they're well liked. I want to see a proper roadmap. Is Osman even the right player to bring to United? He's falling out with Napoli. Could that be a concern? Does he have the personality? I tell you what, Jay, I respect that comment. I really respect that comment because I think that personality is so important. I'm not bothered if Man United say it's going to take us 3 years to remove an ageing squad that's not delivered and bring in a hungry, revitalised squad. That could mean buying a 19-year-old from Genk, who in 3 years' time is going to be one of the better strikers in world football. Over the next 3 years, starting from the goalkeeper, you've probably got to get rid of one of your right-backs. You've probably got to get rid of one of your left-backs. You've got to get rid of Varane, Lindelof, Maguire, just on quality and age differences. Casemiro's got to go. McTominay's got to go. Eriksen's got to go. What we're going to do with Amrabat, I don't know. You've probably got to get rid of one of your wingers as well. We need another striker. There's probably 12, 13 players that need replacing, plus another 3 or 4 squad players. So you're talking 16 players that have got to come in over the next that have got to go and be replaced over the next 2 or 3 years. So it's a massive job, and I don't mind that job. I don't want a sticking plaster. I want major surgery, as Ralph Ronick said. Mikel is mates with Osman. Victor has been on his podcast discussing that Mikel's mission is to get Osman to sign for Chelsea, says Dallas. Look, it's an open goal for Chelsea to get Osman. It really is. Somebody just mentioned Mason Greenwood. Look, Mason Greenwood, we've spoken about him in the past. I know Beth spoke about him yesterday morning. Getafe, surprise, surprise, it's Cilla Black. I rose from the dead. Rest in peace, Cilla. But this is not a surprise to me that Getafe want to sign Mason Greenwood. I mean, they've won the lottery. Mason Greenwood's a talented player with a huge social media interest playing for Getafe. Surprise, surprise, they want to keep him. I mean, they've probably seen huge upscale in interest in their football club. Of course they want to bloody keep him. Whether he stays at Getafe, whether we sell him to somebody else, whether he comes back to Manchester United, look, it's way too early to predict on that. But I think people just get too, some would say quite rightly, involved in the Mason Greenwood story. But for me, I just don't think it's a story at all at the moment. Getafe want to keep him because they've got loads of exposure. I'm not surprised they're a small club. Manchester United keeping him, not a discussion for now. Doesn't even need to be on Sir Jim Radcliffe's top 10 things he needs to do. Mark, what's John from the pub opinion on all this? I haven't spoken to him for a while. Wolf, not spoken to him for a while. Mark, Timo Werner to Manchester United according to the Mail. I don't know what I think about that. I don't even know if it's true. Will Osman maybe leave in January, says Charan. Look, I'll tell you one club that's capable of doing anything in January, and that probably is Chelsea, but I wouldn't expect him to go in January. Got a few more bits to talk about, but let me just give you these. Quotes from Jamie Carragher, and this is what he had to say. If you look back over the last 12 months since Unai Emery came into Aston Villa, and you talk about Man United, they are better coached, and there is absolutely no doubt about that. In terms of Man United and Newcastle, there's a good chance they might not even qualify for Europe in the second half of the season. They could quite easily finish bottom of the Champions League, so they wouldn't even go into the Europa League. I mean, I don't know what he's talking about there. He's talking out of his absolute arse. What's he talking about? The Aston Villa comment's quite interesting. We won't even qualify for the Europa League. What is he talking about? Does he realise that you can qualify for the Europa League from winning the FA Cup? From winning the Europa League, you get back into the Conference League, and also from finishing 6th in the Premier League, you probably get into the Europa League. I mean, look, we don't need to worry about not being in Europe yet. Things are not that bad, and we're currently 6th playing crap, so I don't know what he's talking about there. Carragher obviously likes winding United fans up, but he's probably right about Aston Villa. I think that the way to succeed in life is to look at your mistakes and accept that you're not performing to the level you need to perform to. Aston Villa, over the last 12 months, have they performed better than Man United? I think we dismiss and forget what Ten Hag did last year. He took us to 2 cup finals and got us 3rd place. This season, Aston Villa are performing better than Manchester United. I think the difference between Villa and United at the moment is the consistency. There is a sheer consistency to Aston Villa that they've took the momentum of last season into a new season. Sadly, and I think it's something that needs a bit of a post-mortem, why have United not taken any momentum and work from last season into this year? That is a statement I would just drop there and say, somebody answer it. Why is it all the progression, all the exceeded progression that Ten Hag took last year? Because no one expected Ten Hag in year 1 to get to 2 cup finals and get us 3rd place when you think about what he took over. All that progression has been lost over the summer, and I don't know why. Whereas Emery came in and has took that momentum into a new season and put them in 5th place. I don't know why. Maybe Ten Hag made some bad signings. Maybe he didn't get the players he wanted. Maybe the players are tired. Maybe pre-season was a joke. But that's where Unai Emery is doing a better job than Ten Hag, is that he took the momentum and good work of last season and has improved on it and took it into this year. Whereas Ten Hag has lost all momentum and rhythm from last season. It's like we're starting again. Who would be your dream January signing, says Lincoln? Oh, good question. I think I would like to see us buy a centre-back. I'd like to see us buy a defensive holding midfielder as well. I don't know who we're looking at in that situation. And I would like us to bring in another striker. Charlie Mack says the Ineos Stadium. I can see it now. If it's state-of-the-art, I couldn't care about the name. It will always be Theatre of Dreams, says Charlie. No, it's not even Theatre of Dreams, Charlie. It's Old Trafford. I don't know. I don't want that. Some things are not worth the money. And I don't think there's any money that's worth changing the name of Old Trafford to Ineos or anything like that. I'd be dead against it. Maybe I'm a bit old school. Kadam says Sir Jim has to be totally opposite to the Glazers. With the Glazers still in charge, it's an impossible job. I truly believe we're finished. And look, that is going to always be the question. Probably the biggest question for me is, if Sir Jim Radcliffe comes in and says, I found a way to get £100 million into the club, let's go and buy Victor Osimhen. It'd be a bit more than that, to be fair. And then the Glazers say, we're not spending that amount of money on one player. Who wins? Sir Jim Ratcliffe comes in and says, I want to sack Ten Hag, and the Glazers say no, who wins? I don't want him to come in and say that. I'm just saying they're big decisions. Has Sir Jim Ratcliffe got it written into this contract that he can overrule the Glazers? Because if he hasn't, he's basically holding hands with the Glazers. And we need to remember this. This is what I mean. Everybody's got a right to have an opinion on something that really matters. Otherwise, why are you watching? Why do you watch Manchester United? This is not a full sale, and it is not Glazers out until it is. And this is why I think ex-players and fans have got to be really careful about jumping on board with this, because to me, this only works if Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the Glazers hold hands and work together. I don't want anyone to hold hands with the Glazers. I don't. But that logically has to be what this is. Even if it's just for 3 years, logically, this has to be Sir Jim Ratcliffe holding hands with the Glazers. Otherwise, why is he only buying 25%? And these are the things I want to get a bit more clarity on, because I might have missed the boat here. I might be completely wrong. Maybe the Glazers will have no say in Man United. I don't think that's going to be the case, but he is working with the Glazers. Some people would say he is getting into bed with the Glazers. I would say holding hands. They're not progressed to that yet. I don't know. But look, that is something to keep in your head. I'm sure a lot of people will be excited about what's going to happen, but ultimately, I think for a lot of us, I'm still like, he's working with the Glazers. And the Glazers do not deserve any benefit of the doubt from Man United fans based on what they've done to this great football club over certainly the last 15 years. And even worse since Sir Alex left. Just a few other bits as well. Dalot has withdrawn himself from Portuguese national duty. This is not injury related. Apparently his wife or girlfriend, I don't know the marriage situation there, is about to give birth. So there we go. Our next sponsor, without doubt, will be Ineos, says Jay. So yeah, Dalot has withdrawn. I mean, I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't. I also think that Garnacho not being part of the Argentinian squad might be a bad thing for Garnacho. I think it's a great thing for Manchester United. I would actually love this international break if every Manchester United player wasn't playing international football, whether it's Rashford, Bruno, Dalot, Lindelof, Maguire. I would love them to have 2 weeks off and get a bit of freshness. So I'm actually quite glad that Garnacho isn't part of the Argentinian squad. I'm sure he's not. You know, it's massively important for these South American players to play national football, as we know. I think they really enjoy it. Our English players enjoy it. It's just us that don't enjoy it. But no, I don't think it's a bad thing for Garnacho. And yeah, sometimes a setback can be a real positive, especially for a young player. If they take that as an insult, it can inspire them in their club form. So I think there's a positive with that, with Garnacho. We spoke about Varane. We spoke about the ambassadors. And just back on the ambassadors, by the way, do keep that in mind, that this is not fresh news about Sir Jim Ratcliffe getting ex-players involved. This was mentioned at the start of the year. And I think people have forgotten about it because Sheikh Jassim was going to potentially use Beckham. But Sir Jim Ratcliffe was always linked to bringing in ex-players as well. I don't necessarily agree with it. I don't think an ex-player really offers anything to Manchester United more than a specialist. If you're offering me an ex-player or somebody who actually knows what they're doing, i.e., you know, the very best scout in the world, or the very best CEO, or the very best director of football, or the very best nutritionist or fitness specialist, then I'm going to go with the specialist. I mean, ex-players for me, that doesn't really mean anything. I think the Solskjaer thing has just made me very anti it, because an ex-player is an ex. The clue is in X. You used to play for the club. Unless you've gone off and won things as a manager or been one of the best director of footballs in the world, I don't think ex-players do anything other than this quite shallow PR game. Oh, look, a legend is now part of this. It's a bit like an election campaign, isn't it? But he has been linked to that. And you can still learn quite a lot about what Sir Jim might be planning from a lot of what came out between certainly January and March. Sometimes difficult to find those articles, but there are some interesting bits there, and he certainly will be using ambassadors. I would say to those ambassadors, ex-players, whoever they are, just be very careful what you're signing up for. It must be very attractive to be part of Manchester United's future. But if that future's not good, and involves the Glazers, you're signing up for something that you've probably been very against. I certainly wouldn't be signing up to be an ambassador for Manchester United as an ex-player unless I had it in black and white that the Glazers are leaving. Todibo for Varane and Thuram for Casemiro, says Lee. Yeah, I mean, Thuram at Nice is probably the next player that you'd look at. Yeah, I can agree with that. Nearly went to Liverpool, didn't go to Liverpool. Maybe that's a reason not for Manchester United. My memory of Thuram at Nice is that he's not a holding midfielder, he's more of an attacking midfielder, and we certainly don't need another one of those. We do need an 8, and we definitely need a 6, but we don't need another attacking midfielder. Whether the ones we've got are good enough is by the by, but we've got Eriksen, we've got Mount, we've got Bruno. You could argue Mabry can play there. McTominay can. I think McTominay's best position is an attacking midfielder as well. So I don't think we need another attacking midfielder. Ivan Toney could go to Chelsea, says Brian. Well, he'll be available in January as well. Would you accept a role with Man United if they offered it to you, says Will? Well, I would. I think we all would. To be part of Manchester United, the club that you love, and have a potential, even if it's a small say in its future, I would, but I wouldn't do it if it was like, the Glazers are still going to control the club for the next 10 years. No, I wouldn't be involved in that because that's hypocritical. And I don't want to educate the Glazers either. I wouldn't even go in and go, well, I can change the Glazers' mind. I think they are poisonous and proven poisonous and not trustworthy. The only way I'd go and work for Manchester United if I was an ex-player, or even if they asked me or you, would be if Sir Jim Ratcliffe showed me in writing, in 3 years' time, the Glazers are gone and I'm building the club from now early. It's like getting hold of the keys to the house early so I can start decorating and stuff like that. In that case, I probably would. But I wouldn't do it if it wasn't definitive, because the ability for that to kick back on your reputation. I mean, imagine worst case scenario. Imagine Sir Jim never buys all of the club and the Glazers stay. And imagine there's a big TV deal that comes down the line. And imagine Man United never win anything again for the next 10 years. You sign up for that, your reputation's in the mud. He means if we finish 4th in the Champions League, we're out. Not even a UEFA League place, says John. Oh, yeah. Well, some people wouldn't be too fussed about that, I don't think. Mark, if you were offered an interview with Sir Jim, would you take it? Prefer to stay out of it if considering what you were saying about being involved with the Glazers. I would only do an interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe if I could ask the questions I want to ask and get the answers the fans need. I would not be party to a PR campaign. I would not sit there and have an interview with him because it's going to get loads of views, but not be able to ask the questions. And for example, because you've got to give the detail on this, I would only sit and give an interview. I would only go and do an interview with Sir Jim Ratcliffe if I could ask definitively what you're going to do around recruitment, what you're going to do around fitness, what you're going to do around the stadium, what are you going to do around the purchase of this football club. I want to know, are you definitely buying this football club? When will that happen? And also, I want to know for the next 3 years, what power do you have? Do you ultimately have the power on the footballing side, or the Glazers? If we can't answer those questions, what's the point in doing the interview? I don't know whether that's going to happen, but if you can't get those answers, what's the point in doing the interview? Because you could be facilitating the popularity of somebody who could technically still be a Glazer puppet. Rozzo says, hi Mark, would you go for the likes of Onana from Everton as a number 6? He's an interesting option. He'd be very expensive. Glenny Boy says, are we falling for the old Glazers spin? The owners can't influence FFP. Owners can cover 90% of allowed losses in a 3-year cycle to increase FFP, says Glenny Boy. Are we falling for the old Glazers spin that the owners can't influence? You can influence financial fair play, but what you cannot do as a minority investor is go, there's £200 million to spend on transfers. Because if you could do that, then Saudi Arabia would just give Newcastle £1 billion and say spend it. There are many intricacies and avenues you can go around to circumvent FFP, but it's not as easy as going, there's £200 million to spend in January. It isn't. And also what you've got to look at is, why would Sir Jim Ratcliffe do that anyway? Why would Sir Jim Ratcliffe give £200 million to spend in January, which is notoriously a bad time to spend big money, on a manager that he won't have even had time to assess? Because he might have £200 million to spend on transfers, But when's the best time to spend it? Is it in the summer when you've assessed the manager, you've assessed the problems and you've assessed the squad and you've got a director of football in? Or is it January when you've not assessed the manager, there may not be the quality around there, so you overpay? I don't, specifically I'm talking about these stories about war chests and £200 million to spend in January, but logically we're all impatient and we all want to make change now. But if you've got 200 million to spend, really, coming into the club fresh, I'd only be jumping on signings like Todibo, because you know the manager wants him and you know you can get a good value deal. I wouldn't be going to try and spend that money in January without knowing what I want to spend on. And how could you know that without doing your homework, really? Paul Lucas says, unfortunately, we have to hope Radcliffe makes improvements, even though I don't like this deal. Look, mate, Paul, let's be completely clear here. What's not to like about the deal? What's to like about the deal? We don't know what the deal is. All we know is a few weeks ago on a Saturday night, a newspaper article came out and people started putting stuff on Twitter. We don't know what this deal is. We don't know anything about it. So it could be amazing. It could be absolute crap. And you have to be fair about that. Conveying your concerns is absolutely correct when you've had what we've had with the Glazers for the last 2 decades. But there might be some real definitive, set in stone, legally binding positives in this contract. There might be a map to success that you can really see and go, this could work. On the other hand, we might not get any detail and go, I don't know whether to trust this or not. In a worst case scenario, we might get definitive facts that this is not going to work. So look, this is why this is a really important time. Paul Muscroft says, Radcliffe buying into Manchester United, just do what the Glazers have done for 18 years, says Paul. It's 25%. What's good about this farce, says AK. Look, as I said, we're going to be talking about this a lot over the next coming days and weeks, because we're about to get a real big PR drop of what's going to happen. This is going to get announced officially on the New York Stock Exchange. And from there, when it's ratified, Sir Jim Radcliffe can then start telling us what's going to happen. So Jim said it will always be Old Trafford, says Ben. Yeah, I think one thing about Sir Jim Radcliffe is he's old school, and I don't think he'd want to change the name of Old Trafford anyway. Mark, I'm worried we weren't going to get anyone in January, leaving us and Ten Hag screwed for the rest of the season, says Kate. Look, I don't mind United not buying anyone in January. I think this obsession with January is somewhat naive, because there isn't necessarily always an opportunity in January to go out there and do deals that are going to benefit the football club. If there are deals to be done, then yeah, I think definitely we should be looking to do them, but they're not always there to be done. And we can't just go spending. We're very tight on financial fair play limitations. You go and spend 100 million, you impact the summer. We're only going to be able to spend a lot of money if we get rid of players. And that, I think the biggest thing in January is Jadon Sancho. The biggest test of Sir Jim Radcliffe's new regime is Jadon Sancho. I said it last night. Can he sell him? Can he get rid of him? Or will he be loaning him? Or will he be keeping him? 3 options. What can he do? Strong leadership would be selling him and removing him. Middle of the road would be loaning him and paying his wages. Keeping him would be defeat. And this football club, absolutely categorically, from what I know publicly and privately, which I'm not going to share because it's not fair, is still run by players. There is still a very strong theme of player power at Manchester United. I know that privately and publicly. You know it as publicly as well. I know it privately as well as publicly. Is Sir Jim Radcliffe going to change that? There are players in that football club, and have been players in that football club, who have immense power. Some of them more than managers have had. Some of them more than a CEO has. That's wrong. That needs to change. It's a respect thing, and it's how a club is run. So look, there's some big things that need to change at Manchester United. Anyway, I've really enjoyed that show this morning. I hope you have as well. Absolutely loads to talk about there. Get your comments in below. What are your thoughts about ex-players getting involved? What are your thoughts about this big PR drop that's about to happen? What are your thoughts about Todibo and whether it can be done in January? What are your thoughts on Osman? Is that an option in the summer that you would like United to go down? Do you want to see another top quality striker bringing in? Lots for you to get your teeth into there. I was going to mention very quickly Jadon Sancho for Chiesa. I think we've mentioned it in the past. I don't think there's any legs in this at all. Although I'd rather Sancho for Chiesa, permanent swap deal, than Sancho to Juventus and we're paying his wages. Thanks everyone for watching. We're back again at 2, 8 o'clock show tonight. Thanks everyone. Of course, if anything breaks around this Jim deal, we will be live. So keep yourself tuned into the United Stands. Smash a like and subscribe. And I will speak to you all in a bit. Legends in the chat, thanks for joining me this morning. Take care.